Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, who is suffering from allergies right now.
It is that season.
It is.
I usually have allergies really bad right now, but mine are actually non-existent. So somehow I got off the hook. But yeah, the pollen is a-flying.
I was working outside yesterday, and the pollen is definitely doing a job on me.
Yeah, my youngest is really suffering with his allergies. So it's that time of year.
Yes, it is, but I'm glad it's spring.
Yeah, yes. It is beautiful.
It is.
Thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. And if you would like to become a patron, of course, head over to patreon.com/speakingout. And we just recently got 2 brand new patrons. So we thank you guys for your support.
Thank you.
And it's always exciting to meet new people.
It is.
So, the topic for today is why cutting ties with abusers is essential. Man, this is another one of those that we don't hear talked about very often, at least from this angle. Probably the most, or the second most asked question, I don't really know because I don't document them, but I get asked this question probably the most often or second most often by church leaders is, how do we minister to, speaking of the abuser, how do we minister to this brother who's in need? And still in 2021, 10 years after I've been doing this full time, I still get that question.
10 years, by the way?
Yeah, I know.
It just hit me hard the other day. I thought, wow.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, right.
So, that question, just the very premise of it, shows what's on the mind of Christian leaders. They are all about reconciliation, forgiveness, joining hands with the abuser and their victims, and having them ride off into the sunset, living this happily ever after fairy tale. Well, that's not reality, and that shows that they don't really understand the dynamics of abusers. And I'm not being harsh or mean to them. It's a proven fact. I mean, abusers do not change their stripes. They are who they are. We've had plenty of episodes about that. There's plenty of research on that.
Yes. And
it's very important for Christians to help separate the oppressor from the oppressed, period. I was just reading Psalm 64 today, and that whole psalm is about standing up on behalf of the oppressed and intervening whenever they're being oppressed. So abusers... we want to make a few points here, but one, the abusers don't leave their victims alone, even from prison. And I think that's a really important thing to understand because, I hear this really often in the church where they say, well, didn't this person do their time? Didn't they? Yeah. Don't you think that they suffered enough that they meted out their sentence? They were given a prison sentence. They served that sentence. They did their time. They've expressed that they're repentant, and isn't it time to move on?
And that frustrates me more than you can ever imagine, Jimmy, because in my mind, the victims/survivors of abuse are serving their time forevermore.
Right. Yeah, and for the rest of their lives, they're living out a sentence that they don't deserve.
That they didn't deserve, right. They did nothing to bring this pain on to them. But the abuser is relentless. And you are right. And I think that's data-driven, that's fact-driven, that time and time and time again, the abuser will continue to, I'll call it attack, just go in for the blood.
But
so
they
to
do it in
speak.
a really manipulative way.
Very
Like,
much so.
my dad wrote me from prison. I mean, tons of times, and he was all excited. He was gonna write a book from prison for his victims, telling them how important it was to have a good, strong relationship with God. Do you realize how screwed up and twisted that is?
I remember sitting in the courtroom on the day of his sentencing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when he stood up before the judge and he asked for leniency
Mm-hmm.
because he wanted to be able to go into the schools
Mm-hmm.
to teach others how to stay away
Right.
from abusers such as him. And as I looked at him, I thought, you are the most cunning,
Mm-hmm.
evil,
Yep.
manipulative person I have ever met.
Mm-hmm.
That even now, when all of this, and it wasn't all of what he did, but so much had been exposed, and he admitted to it.
Yeah.
He
Some of it anyway.
some of it,
Yeah.
right, stood there and said, yes, I did that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I want you to be lenient to me.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking
Well,
forevermore, the victims of his abuse will suffer. They
Well,
are
he wrote me
suffering.
letters where he was saying, I mean, this was from county jail before he received his prison sentence. And he was saying, when I get out,
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to need you to give me a platform at church to be able to talk about God's grace and forgiveness. And I thought,
You know that phrase that you just used, I'm going to need you to do. He
yeah,
used
it
to-
wasn't a request, it was a
No,
demand.
it was a command and a demand. He would leave me letters like that on the table. Yeah, I need you to
Yeah.
do this. I
Yeah.
need you to do that. I need not will you will. And
Yeah.
he has abusers are like that.
Yeah.
They know how to prey on people, and they twist it so that in your mind you're not sure, should I do this, or there's and I know for a fact that your dad has used that technique on some of the siblings to
Yeah, I was just going to say some of the, some of his victims within the family who he wrote these gushing letters from prison, how much he loves them and he just misses them. And, he just feels so bad that they don't correspond back to him. It's not that he missed who they are. It's that he was using that to guilt them and shame them by subtly saying, you're not reciprocating letters. You're not writing to me. And, I'm just this poor, broken, lonely man in prison. So, this point needs to be made crystal clear. Abusers do not leave their victims alone, even from prison. Think about domestic violence and sexual abusers who keep their victims, who oftentimes is a spouse, under their control, not allowing them to leave. They'll give the empty promises. Well, I'm going to do better. I love you.
I didn't mean this.
Yeah, I didn't mean it.
It just happened.
Yep.
And
I
love
don't.
you.
Something came over me.
Yeah.
Something came over me, and I don't even remember saying and doing all those awful things to you.
Right.
That's total bull.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it
when
is.
an abuser does these things serially, it's not a fit of rage. It's very intentional.
And as we know with sexual abusers, their actions are very well thought out. It's not there's nothing impulsive about it.
No, not at all.
Nothing impulsive. And I think we need to differentiate that from regular, I'll call it regular sin, if you want to, for lack of knowing what to say. But an intentional wanting to harm someone, especially children, that's a no-no. And we talked about that last week, how God feels about that.
Yeah.
But for the churches to teach extending an arm of friendship, extending fellowship, extending forgiveness, and all of that, I believe is so wrong.
Yeah, I still
Yes,
remember. I mean, but
yes.
that's a script that they assume reconciliation and forgiveness. They just automatically assume that,
Right.
and so that becomes the mandate that if you've been victimized, the onus is on you to forgive and to
Right.
reconcile with your abuser.
Or what? You
Or
can
you're
never
or
heal.
you're kicked out of
You
the
can,
church, or you
can-
can't heal,
or you
right?
won't heal.
Or you're full of bitterness if
Yes.
if you don't reconcile with your abuser,
Yes.
you're just full of all this
And
hatred
the
and
scripture
bitterness.
also, if you don't forgive, God won't forgive you. On and on, and the guilt, that the layers of guilt
Yeah.
that is thrown on an abused survivor is terrible.
Yeah,
Absolutely
but I remember years
horrendous.
ago, Focus on the Family had reached out to me, and they said, we caught wind of your story, and we just think it's really powerful, and we would love to do a special on. It was on your relationship with your dad, and we're coming from the angle of reconciliation, and they're like, if you could send us a short video where you spoke about how you and your father reconciled. We'll review that, and we want to really consider having you on and doing a feature story. So I wrote them back and I was like, to be blunt, that's not my story.
Yeah. Right.
My story is not a story of reconciliation. Because I talked to my father doesn't mean that we have this riding off into the sunset story where we live happily ever after. That's not my story. But I'll still send you a video. So I sent them a video, and they replied back. I mean, within a day, they replied back and said, yeah, we're sorry, but this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit what we were looking for. And I was like, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I knew that. Because you want this picture perfect story where the abuser sees the light of day, and more importantly, the people who that abuser has harmed and humiliated have seen the light of day. And
it's deep,
that's
much
it's
deeper
so strange.
than a humiliation. It is such a harm of the psyche, of the mind, of the heart, of the body, of the spirit. A spiritual. There are spiritual wounds that reach clear into the depths of what a person is, to the core of them, that I think we can't even begin to say the depth of pain and the depth of that wound when a young person is abused in such a way. It's horrific. It's wrong. It's evil.
Well, and I want to read from Lauren Book's book. Her last name is Book, Book. Lauren Book is a Florida senator, and her dad's a prominent attorney. She wrote an excellent book years ago. She also has the organization Lauren's Kids, but she wrote the book It's Okay to Tell. I'll hold it up here. Excellent book.
Sure is.
But I want to get you into the mind of the abuser. Her abuser happened to be her nanny, female nanny, and she was brutally abused, sexually, physically, emotionally, spiritually. She was abused. But here's what I mean. Abusers don't leave their victims alone. And I say even from prison. I'm going to fast forward for a second, then I'm going to back up to this little blurb. But Lauren writes about her abuser when she was put in prison. She would write love letters to Lauren from prison. And Lauren talked about how she really struggled with that because she felt so guilty for not writing her back. So eventually she did. And she was writing her abuser in prison because she felt guilt, and she felt obligated to reciprocate that quote unquote love back to her. And it's just so manipulative.
It's such an entrapment. The whole thing is. And when you think about it, isn't that part of the thrill?
Absolutely,
of
it
an
is.
abuser?
100%. Yeah. So
It's
my
true.
dad was doing that too.
Right.
He was writing letters to his then minor victims.
Right.
And he had done the most horrific things to these little kids. And their father had spoken to me, and otherwise I wouldn't have known that. But, I remember him calling me up, and he's like, are you aware that your dad was writing love letters? He said it sounded like a teenager gushing over his teenage girlfriend. He was writing love letters addressed to this man's daughters from prison. Now, how that ever got through, I don't know. That's a major boo-boo on the side of the prison. But obviously the dad intercepted letters and never allowed his
Right.
daughters to read them.
Right.
But it
Thank
shows
God. Because,
what's
and
on
that,
his mind from
right.
prison, what
Right.
he's
Well,
doing.
yeah.
And he's
Right.
writing love letters to his victims.
It just messes the mind up so badly. So
Yeah.
badly.
So here's what Lauren writes. After she writes about this physical, where she was badly beaten by her sexual abuser. And by the way, Lauren was a young child. She was a minor. So here's what she says. Finally, she pushes the hair out of my face, saying in a syrupy tone, "You shouldn't have made me do that. You know how much I love you. But I had to teach you a lesson. I did it for your own good. Do you understand why I had to do that?" And then Lauren goes on, "I'm still frozen in terrified silence until I realize from her expectant look that I'm supposed to answer yes. What do you say? I'm sorry. Will you do that? Will you do what I tell you now? Yes. So I do. And afterward, she takes me in her arms and spoons with me in her bed, rocking me and saying soothing things in my ear." I mean, do you understand this is what abusers do? This is who they are. This is the definition of a wolf.
Right.
And so when churches are forcing this reconciliation with these people, because on the outside, they see the abuser gushing over their victims, saying, "Oh my goodness, no! Like I want to have a relationship with this person who I harmed, and I want to make things right." So church leaders see that on the outside, and what they don't see is what's going on inwardly. Is that this is all manipulation. It's all part of the game.
Crafty. It is evil.
Yep, it's
it is,
cruel.
Once again,
it's mean.
It is well thought out. It is a mind manipulation game, and a child or a young adult even will get sucked into that so easily.
Yeah.
Why? Because we crave love.
Yeah,
Every
and because they
one
feel
of
guilty
us.
because
It
the
makes
person
you
is being
feel-
nice. This
Right.
lady is cuddling with her in bed,
Right. What a
saying
mixed
soothing
up,
things in her ear.
mixed up message.
Do you realize what that does to somebody psychologically?
It would screw with your mind so bad.
So, what abusers do, they promise their victims the world while also taking their world away from
Right.
them.
It's a good way of putting it, and it is a truthful way of putting
Yeah.
it. Yes.
So, the second big point we want to make is that churches often focus on reconciliation between abusers and their victims, especially if they're married to each other. So it's this whole idea that, the only way that you can divorce biblically is if your spouse cheated on you. I mean, right? We grew up hearing that and believing that and being told. My dad preached sermons like that. The only means for a biblical divorce is if if a spouse cheats on the other.
There is still a shadow that is over me when I'm asked, "Are you married?" And I will at first I lied. I'll be honest to you, and I said yes. I would say yes, because there was such a shame.
I'm married to Jesus.
There was such a shame on my part for a failed marriage. I have come to understand now I didn't fail in that marriage.
No.
I did not fail in
Nope.
that marriage. The man I was married to was evil. He was treacherous. He harmed children. He harmed many of my children. And I want nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
Now I can say that, but it's many years later.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that the church's teaching on divorce, even among the most horrific of abuse, is you need to forgive. And if you are living a godly life, you can win that person over.
Yeah.
Well, not true. People.
No, it's not.
Not true.
No, and that's certainly, that's
true.
not the context
Right.
that Paul was talking about.
Not at all.
Winning over your spouse.
Right.
He's talking about unbelievers who are not abusive.
Right.
Clearly, Paul's not writing about abusive,
No.
oppressive
Instead,
evil,
we're told
wicked
what?
people.
Cut them off.
Right,
Be
yeah,
done
evil
with-
people,
yes,
deceivers.
Cut them off.
Yeah, have nothing to do with
no.
them.
And I will tell you, there is a weight that is lifted when you do that.
Yeah.
When you
But you
there
have to
is.
have people who back you up on
Yes,
that.
you do.
Because
It's
trying
not
to cut the
easy,
abuser
yeah.
out of your
No,
life,
it's
they're
hard.
so persistent that they keep coming back. They'll keep
Yep.
writing letters. They'll keep calling.
Yes.
They'll keep worming their way back into your life. And they're doing this stuff in front of other people. And that, again, that's by design. So it's this gushing, oh my goodness, I'm being so kind to her, and I've asked for forgiveness, and look at how she's treating me. I'm now the victim.
I got told
right. That's what abusers
by
say.
members of the church that your husband said you just went crazy. You were so mean to him, and you wouldn't talk to him, and you were, well, no, I didn't go crazy. I just got smart. My eyes got opened.
Yeah.
And I don't want anything to do with that. But you're right, Jimmy. You have to have support to do that.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of strength to be able to.
I mean, church leaders ought to, and I say church leaders because that's kind of my focus. And,
Right.
I really work hard because there are so few church leaders who get it right. I really work hard to try to explain to them and help them see that there's more to the story than what they see when somebody
Right.
puts an arm. If somebody's putting an arm around somebody who they horrifically victimized, that ought to be red flag number one, like atomic bomb level,
big time,
where you push their arm
You
off
don't
of the
do
victim,
that, right.
yeah,
Yes.
and ask the victim, "Are you okay?"
Right.
They shouldn't be anywhere near their victims,
No.
unless that victim is the one who initiates the beginning of
And
reconciliation.
I think that's rare, though.
It is
That's
rare.
very
It's incredibly rare.
Yes.
So, why do churches focus on reconciliation besides for bad theology? Well, I have a couple things written down here, but one, abusers give empty promises to church leaders. Oh, I promise I'm a changed man.
Yeah.
Or they deny abuse altogether. They give empty promises, they minimize the abuse, or they deny it altogether. And they say, my goodness, if I ever did anything to harm anybody, right? Mm-hmm. How often do you hear that expression from abusers?
I got letters from your dad, which I never
If
responded
I've ever done
to,
anything
by the way.
to hurt you,
I never did
I'm
anything
sorry.
that bad. Never, really? You never did anything that bad. Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, the second point within this is, we should never underestimate the convincibility of an abuser. Mm-hmm. They're very good at being believable, which is how they often get away with abuse in plain sight in the first place.
Right.
They are masters at being believable. And I still remember I was in the prison visiting with my dad. He looks me in the eyes and he says, if you are expecting to be able to figure out when abusers like me are lying, good luck. Mm-hmm. He said, because I have no problem. And he's looking me in the eyes. He's saying this. He said, I have no problem looking you in the eye and lying to your face, and you will never know that I'm lying.
It just gives me chills all over. It really does.
I mean, that was out of his mouth.
To the extent of the evil.
This is in the context of sexual abuse of minor children. Horrific. I mean, he had rape charges. I mean, this is the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. And he's looking me in the eye saying, I have no problem looking you in the eye and lying through my teeth, and you would have no idea. Mm-hmm. See, for me, if I do anything wrong, I'm so racked with guilt that I suck at lying. Right?
Well, my cheeks.
I know. Yeah, right? Mine too. I must get it from you.
And I
am the worst at lying. I am the worst person in the world.
That's a blessing, though. That's a good thing.
Yeah, but it sucks.
I know. I know what you're saying.
You know how many times I've got caught doing, nothing bad, but just stupid things.
I think of you as a kid, and it's like
I can't get away with
these
anything.
Rosy cheeks. Yeah.
It's awful.
I'm thinking, oh boy, okay. Yeah. He's my kid. Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, it is. That's a good thing to be able to blush. And you can't control that. No. That's an automated response.
That is.
That's a physiological response to feeling guilt.
It is.
to feeling shame.
Yes, to feeling.
So you need to understand abusers who can lie through their teeth and smile and nod while they're lying to you, talking about raping children.
It's
For them to have no
frightening.
shame,
Yes.
no guilt, not to blush even a little bit, that's incredible.
It's frightening.
It is.
It is. Yes.
So, telling victims to forgive and reconcile very often puts them in a very dangerous, even life-threatening situation. And courts do this all the time when they place them back in an abusive home. The abuser will stand before the microphone. My goodness, Judge, Your Honor, and they're wearing their suit and tie. I'm so broken over what I've done. You have no idea how this has eaten me up inside. I just can't believe that that's the person who I was, that I would succumb to that kind of violence and those kinds of behaviors. And I'm so ashamed to stand before the court today, Your Honor.
Part of it is we are trained to believe people. We really are. We're trained not to question people. We're thrown this big guilt thing if we question the sincerity of someone. So we're trained from little up to just accept what somebody says.
Take it at face value. It's don't question their motives.
If they tell you
don't be too judgy.
They have turned a leaf and they're a new person, believe them. Because if you question them, you are the bad person. You are the wrong person. You are the one that needs scolded.
And it's nobody's able to truly look into somebody's heart except for God, which is totally bogus.
Yeah, it is.
There are lots of scriptures that talk about looking into people's hearts. God is not the only one who can peer into people's hearts. Now, God is the only one who knows people's hearts fully. But absolutely, we can look into people's hearts. We can know what's on their hearts and their mind, at least to a pretty big extent. So I'm going to read an excerpt of a letter that I just pulled this out randomly. So, I mean, this is from a couple years ago. But
no, this is from your dad,
Yeah, this
right?
is from my dad. He wrote this from prison. So he starts off, I pray all is well with you and your family. Just wanted to wish you a very happy birthday and to tell you that in my humble opinion, the world continues to be a much better place with you on it. I'm proud to call you my son and friend. Now, when you read that, if I were just to give this letter to somebody and say, hey, here's a letter that my dad wrote me, you know what the response would be? Aww, right?
Yep.
I turned him into the police with you. He's in prison for the rest of his life. And I want to say because of us. It's not because of us. Because,
no, it's because of his actions.
Him.
It is what.
But we were the ones who reported him. He knows that.
Yes.
He has written me scathing letters from prison. But then he writes me this, and if I didn't know better, I'd be like, ah, and I would let my guard down and be like, what a soft-hearted, kind man.
Yep.
In my humble opinion.
And I still say it goes back to that very basic need for all of us to be loved. We want to be loved.
Yeah.
You, as his son, you adored your dad. He knows that. And what better way to snare you than to say, Jimmy,
than to gush all over me.
Yep, I'm so proud of you.
In my humble opinion.
So proud to call you my son.
The world is a better place with you on it.
All right. I think it's interesting, and I'm kind of proud of it, and I don't get proud of very many things that I do, but kind of proud of myself for never responding to his letters, ever once. Because, and I've always said that when you shut down an abuser, they eventually will find some other place.
They do.
And I refused, even though I wanted to lash out to him so much in his letters, I would not answer one. And he eventually stopped. And it's real funny how, he always, he would start by
But if you were to write back, do you know he'd still be writing you to this day?
I do know that.
Obsessively writing you to this day?
I do know that.
So I think that's interesting, and you bring up an interesting point because James says, "Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." That's a pretty simple, pretty basic concept, right? Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. So I talked about this when I was at the Salvation Army last year. I had done a training out in the Pittsburgh area. And I brought up that passage and I said, that sounds like a great passage. And we want to rah-rah that passage. And we want to cheer it on and be like, yeah, go, James, go. Resist the devil. He'll flee from you. And I said, but it does us little good if we don't know how the devil thinks or what the devil looks like.
Yep.
Right? If most of us don't expect the devil to look like this. Mm-hmm. Just wanted to wish you a very happy birthday and to tell you that in my humble opinion, the world continues to be a much better place with you on it. I'm proud to call you my son and friend, right? That doesn't, in our minds, that doesn't compute that this is satanic to its core. This is evil. There's manipulation behind this. We do not have a normal relationship. I mean, I'm pretty blunt about that. I'm pretty public about that.
How could you? You are
my father and I do not have a normal relationship at all.
How could you? Right, exactly.
So, we can't resist the devil if we're entertaining this stuff.
Right.
And, if you were writing letters back to him and being like, oh,
No.
I'm going to take the higher road and I'm going to maintain a friendship with him.
No.
Even though we're divorced and even though he's in prison and he did all these horrible things, we're going to maintain a friendship.
His letters were quite interesting, bragging me up as the mother, the one who kept the family together.
While he's writing me, ripping you to shreds.
Right.
Your mother was bipolar. I'm so sorry that you have to deal with your mom's bipolar.
I always love that. I just love that. But he, you are the only person who could keep this family together. I pray for you on my knees every day, asking God to strengthen you and keep you healthy. And how I wanted to respond with what was on my heart, but I did not. And that scripture has a lot to do with it because I knew once I did respond, he knew he had me.
Yeah,
he
absolutely.
Had me. He
100%.
would use me. He
100%.
would use me, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I didn't. But
so how can and how should churches respond instead? I think instead they need to look at the facts about an abusive person, both past and present. They need to look at the facts about an abusive person and help victims get away, not force reconciliation. So I think, I didn't write this down in the notes, but I think it just came to mind hearing you talk. Number one, and probably most importantly, how do you know the facts about an abuser? How do you get in their head and in their heart a little bit? Number one, top of the list, talk to their victims.
yeah.
Say,
Absolutely.
hey, is
Absolutely.
this man who abused you, is he manipulating you right now? Is he using love and twisting that to both get into and to stay inside of your life? Is he twisting?
Is he using your weak spots?
Yeah.
And they know our
is
weak
he
spots.
guilting you?
Yes.
Is he?
And yes,
Do
absolutely.
you have a relationship with this person? And is it because you feel pressured or guilted or manipulated into being there? How do you feel about this person? Do you feel that this person has fully repented? Ask those questions. That ought to be number one at the top of the list. Before even talking to the abuser.
Right.
Before even entertaining 5 seconds in front of the abuser. You should talk to the abuser's victims, all of them, and ask these questions.
I will amen that 1,000 times over, because who better knows the mind of the abuser than the victim of the abuse.
And what they're currently doing.
And what they're doing.
Right.
Absolutely.
Like right now.
Absolutely. Yes.
What are they doing? Are they taunting their victim? Are they doing stuff like what Lauren's abuser did?
Or sending love letters.
Or sending love letters to them.
Yes.
Or offering to spiritually mentor them.
Exactly. Or asking for pictures to be sent so that they can see how wonderful they're growing. And no.
So, a few more questions. Are they viewing or producing explicit abusive content with children? If they're a child abuser, sexual abuser, are they viewing or producing explicit abusive content with children? Or are they just talking gross about children? Are they?
I'm going to interject something you said last week, Jimmy, in the podcast. And that was, if an abuser of children, and we're talking younger children, is truly repentant, that person will do everything possible to stay away from the
Right.
enticement of children.
Right.
Everything. That person will not
Right.
work hard to get back into the life and lives of children.
Right.
That person will say, look, Jimmy, or whoever
Yeah.
the leader is, I don't trust myself in this position. I can't do it. I cannot.
Right.
I will not allow myself to do it. I am a changed person.
Yeah.
By
But
that,
you won't hear. I mean, you won't hear that from them.
you won't.
I mean, you're just
but
not.
I'm saying, right, if we heard something like that, it might be an indication.
Right.
Yes.
Do they have a history of shaming or name calling or talking bad about a partner? Do they have multiple allegations of sexual abuse? Do they give misleading statements or blatant lies about their degrees, about where they were, about their interests, about anything? Are they lying or misleading you in any way? And finally, but certainly not an exhaustive list, do they have a criminal history? If so, look it up. Find out what they've done.
Research.
Find out the facts.
Right.
And do not force reconciliation. That should not be your first response. So we're going to leave you with this truth bomb today. Look at the facts. Abusers are fairly easy to identify. Don't get reeled in by their charm. Keep them away from their victims unless their victims request a process of reconciliation, and even then use extreme
Caution. Woo, please.
We'll leave you with that. Thank you for tuning into this episode. We'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.